The sky over New York City turned dark in the middle of a bright afternoon. It wasn't clouds that blocked the sun, and it wasn't a storm rolling in. People stopped walking, cars slowed down, and everyone looked up. Hundreds of phones were raised to capture what seemed like an eclipse or some strange weather event. But then the ships appeared. They came down from the heavens, massive and metallic, blotting out the light of the sun. These weren't just spaceships. They were colossal structures, each one larger than any skyscraper on Earth. On their surfaces, glowing symbols marked them as part of something far greater than anyone could have imagined: the Galactic Empire. No one on Earth had ever heard of this empire before. Humanity had long dreamed of meeting alien life, but not like this. The ships didn't hover peacefully or send messages of friendship. Instead, they descended with purpose, landing in major cities across the globe. Within minutes, communication. Networks began to fail. Satellites went dark, phone lines cut off, and the internet collapsed. Panic spread faster than anyone could react. Governments scrambled to understand what was happening, but the invaders left no room for questions. In Washington, D.C., Jason Carter sat in a dimly lit room at the Department of Defense. He was a young analyst, barely into his 30s, with short brown hair and tired eyes. His job was to monitor global threats, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. Across the table, Laura Bennett worked furiously on her laptop. She was in her late 20s with curly black hair tied back in a messy bun. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she tried to piece together fragmented data from dying satellites. "This isn't just a visit," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "They're here for something." Jason nodded but didn't respond. He couldn't take his eyes off the screens showing live footage of the ships. They loomed over cities like gods, silent and unyielding. Then, without warning, a voice boomed through every device still functioning: televisions, radios, even car stereos. It was deep and mechanical, clearly artificial, yet filled with authority. "Attention, humans," the voice declared. "You are now under the control of the Galactic Empire. Surrender unconditionally or face annihilation." The message repeated itself in multiple languages, leaving no room for misunderstanding. There was no negotiation, no explanation of why they had come. Just a demand for surrender and a threat of destruction. Jason felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced at Laura, who had gone pale. "What do we do?" she whispered. Before either of them could answer, alarms blared throughout the building. Reports flooded in from military bases around the world. The invaders weren't waiting for humanity to decide. Their ships opened, and soldiers poured out. Not human soldiers, but beings clad in sleek silver armor. They moved with precision, taking control of key locations within minutes. Resistance was met with overwhelming force. Tanks exploded, fighter jets were shot down, and entire armies crumbled under the Empire's superior technology. Back in New York, chaos reigned. Crowds ran through the streets, desperate to escape. Some tried to fight back, grabbing whatever weapons they could find, but it was useless. The Empire's soldiers carried weapons that fired beams of light, cutting through steel and flesh alike. Buildings collapsed, fires raged, and smoke filled the air. Amidst the destruction, a young woman named Sarah Miller crouched behind an overturned car. She was a nurse, not a soldier, but survival instincts kicked in. Her heart pounded as she watched the invaders march past, their movements cold and calculated. Sarah wasn't alone. A man lay bleeding beside her, clutching his side. His name was Alex Rivera, and he had been caught in the crossfire while trying to protect his family. "Help me," he gasped, his voice weak. Sarah hesitated only for a moment before crawling toward him. She tore off part of her shirt and pressed it against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," she urged, though she knew the odds were against them both. Elsewhere in Los Angeles, another group of survivors huddled in an abandoned subway station. Among them was Daniel Hayes, a retired Marine who had seen combat in his younger days. Now in his 40s, with graying hair and a scar running down his cheek, he found himself thrust back into a war he thought he'd left behind. "We can't just sit here," he told the others, his voice firm despite the fear in the room. If we don't fight back, they'll kill us all anyway. But how? Asked Emily Dawson, a scientist who had joined the group after fleeing her lab. She was in her early 30s with glasses perched on her nose and a notebook clutched tightly in her hands. Their weapons are too advanced. We don't stand a chance. Daniel shook his head. Maybe not directly, but if we hit them where they least expect it, we might buy ourselves some time. He didn't know yet what that plan would be, but he refused to give up. Humanity had always found ways to survive, even in the darkest times. This wouldn't be any different. As night fell, the Empire's ships continued to dominate the skies. Fires burned across continents, and cries of despair echoed through the ruins of once thriving cities. Yet amid the devastation, small acts of defiance flickered like sparks in the darkness. Underground networks formed, sharing information and resources. Plans were made in whispers hidden from prying eyes. And somewhere deep beneath the surface, scientists like Emily worked tirelessly, searching for a way to turn the tide. For now, the Empire believed it had won. Humanity was broken, scattered, and seemingly powerless. But they underestimated one thing: the resilience of the human spirit. Even as the world burned, hope lingered in the hearts of those who refused to surrender. Surrender wasn't an option. It never had been. Not for people like Jason, Laura, Sarah, Alex, Daniel, and Emily. Not for billions of others who clung to life with every ounce of strength they had left. And so, as the Empire tightened its grip on Earth, humanity prepared to fight back. Not with brute force, but with cunning, determination, and sacrifice. For the first time in history, the entire planet stood united against a common enemy. The battle ahead would be long and brutal, but one thing was certain: humanity's response to the invasion would be simple. They would die fighting. Jason Carter sat in a cramped underground bunker deep beneath the Pentagon. The air was stale, and the faint hum of generators filled the silence. Around him, military officers and government officials argued loudly, their voices overlapping, in frustration. No one knew what to do. The Galactic Empire's forces had already taken control of major cities, and their advanced technology made resistance seem impossible. But Jason couldn't give up. None of them could. Humanity's survival depended on finding a way to fight back. Laura Bennett typed furiously on her laptop, her fingers moving so fast they almost blurred. She was trying to decipher fragments of data intercepted from the Empire's communications. Her face was pale and dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept in days. "They're not just here to conquer," she said suddenly, breaking the tension in the room. Everyone turned to look at her. "Their messages. They keep mentioning resources. They're harvesting something from Earth." "What kind of resources?" asked General Thompson, a tall man with graying hair and a stern expression. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "I don't know yet," Laura admitted. "But if we can figure out what they want, maybe we can use it against them." Jason nodded slowly. "It's a start. We need to hit them where it hurts. If we can disrupt their operations, even for a little while, it might give us time to regroup." The room fell silent as everyone considered the idea. It was risky, but they didn't have many options. Daniel Hayes, the retired Marine who had joined the meeting via video call, spoke up. His face appeared on a small screen mounted on the wall. "We can't fight them head on," he said. "Their weapons are too powerful. But if we make them think we're weaker than we are, they might get careless. That's when we strike." His words sparked a new wave of discussion. Slowly, a plan began to take shape. The group decided to spread misinformation, making it seem like Earth's defenses were crumbling. Laura would hack into communication systems and broadcast fake reports of surrender. At the same time, scientists and engineers would work on developing new weapons using whatever technology they could salvage. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. In Los Angeles, Sarah Miller and Alex Rivera found themselves part of a growing resistance movement. After treating Alex's wound in the streets of New York, Sarah had managed to escape the city with him. They traveled west, hoping to find safety, but instead discovered chaos everywhere they went. Cities were burning, and people were desperate. When they reached Los Angeles, they stumbled upon a group of survivors hiding in an old warehouse near the docks. The leader of the group was a wiry man named Kevin Doyle, who introduced himself with a firm handshake. "We're not just sitting here waiting to die," he told them. "We're hitting back, one target at a time." Kevin explained that his team had been sabotaging the Empire's supply lines, blowing up convoys and destroying equipment. It was dangerous work, but it gave people hope. Sarah hesitated. She wasn't a fighter. She was a nurse. But Alex, still recovering from his injury, insisted on joining the group. "I've got nothing left to lose," he said grimly. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed to stay. If nothing else, her medical skills would be useful. Over the next few days, Sarah and Alex learned how the resistance operated. They worked in small teams, striking quickly and disappearing before the Empire's soldiers could respond. One night, Kevin led a mission to destroy a fuel depot outside the city. Sarah stayed behind to tend to the wounded, but Alex went along. As they crept through the darkness, Alex felt a mix of fear and determination. He thought about his family, killed during the invasion, and clenched his fists. He wouldn't let their deaths be in vain. When they reached the depot, the team planted explosives and set them off. Flames erupted into the night sky, lighting up the horizon. For a brief moment, Alex allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe they really could fight back. Meanwhile, in a secret lab buried beneath the Arctic ice, Emily Dawson worked tirelessly alongside a team of engineers. The facility was cold and isolated, but it housed some of humanity's most advanced experimental projects. Most of them had been abandoned years ago due to lack of funding, but now they were humanity's only chance. Emily focused on retrofitting old missile silos with energy cores scavenged from failed space programs. The goal was to create a weapon capable of penetrating the Empire's shields, a task that seemed nearly impossible. "We're running out of time," she muttered to herself as she adjusted a panel on the prototype device. Beside her, a young engineer named Ryan Collins offered a weak smile. "We'll get it done," Ryan said, though his voice lacked confidence. He had been working nonstop for days, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. "If anyone can pull this off, it's you." Emily appreciated the encouragement, but she knew the odds were stacked against them. Even if they succeeded in building the weapon, deploying it would require massive amounts of power that would leave nearby regions completely defenseless. It was a gamble, but it was the only option they had. As the hours dragged on, Emily's mind wandered to the world above. She thought about the billions of people suffering under the Empire's rule. She thought about the cities reduced to rubble and the families torn apart. And she thought about the sacrifices that had already been made and the ones yet to come. A lump formed in her throat, but she pushed it down. There was no time for grief. Not now. Back in Washington, D.C., Jason and Laura finalized their strategy for spreading misinformation. Using hacked satellites, they broadcast fake messages claiming that Earth's military forces had collapsed. "Attention, Galactic Empire," the message read. "Humanity submits to your authority. Cease hostilities, and we will comply with your demands." It was a lie, but they hoped it would trick the invaders into lowering their guard. As the message went live, Jason felt a pang of guilt. He hated the idea of appearing weak, but he knew it was necessary. "This is our best shot," he told Laura, who nodded silently. Both of them understood the risks. If the Empire saw through the deception, the consequences would be catastrophic. Despite the tension, there were moments of quiet camaraderie. Late at night, when the bunker was empty except for the two of them, Jason and Laura shared stories about their lives before the invasion. Jason talked about his love for hiking and how he used to spend weekends exploring the mountains. Laura mentioned her passion for astronomy and how she had always dreamed of seeing the stars up close. Neither of them imagined it would happen like this. Across the globe, humanity prepared for the fight of its life. In Los Angeles, Kevin's resistance group planned their next attack. In the Arctic, Emily and her team worked around the clock to perfect their weapon. And in Washington, D.C., Jason and Laura monitored the Empire's response to their deception. For now, the invaders seemed to believe the lie. Their forces slowed their advance, focusing on consolidating their gains rather than pushing further. But everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. When that happened, humanity would need to be ready. The coming battle would determine the fate of the planet, and possibly the entire galaxy. Failure was not an option. In the days following the broadcast of the fake surrender message, the resistance movement gained momentum. People who had been hiding in fear began to emerge, inspired by whispers of rebellion. In Los Angeles, Kevin Doyle's group grew larger as more survivors joined their cause. Among them was a young woman named Maria Lopez, who had lost her parents during the invasion. She carried a small handgun and a fierce determination to fight back. "I'm not running anymore," she told Sarah Miller when they first met. Sarah nodded, recognizing the same resolve that burned within herself. The group's next target was an Imperial communications tower located on the outskirts of the city. The tower allowed the invaders to maintain contact with their fleet in orbit, making it a critical piece of infrastructure. Taking it down would disrupt their operations and buy humanity more time. Kevin laid out the plan during a meeting held in the dimly lit warehouse. "We'll hit them at dawn," he said, pointing to a crude map drawn on a scrap of paper. 3 teams. Team 1 will disable the perimeter guards, Team 2 will plant explosives at the base of the tower, and Team 3 will cover our retreat. Sarah volunteered for Team 2, knowing her medical skills might be needed if anyone got hurt. Alex insisted on joining her despite still being weak from his injury. "I'm not sitting this one out," he said firmly. Reluctantly, Kevin agreed, assigning them both to the demolition team. The night before the mission, the group gathered to check their equipment. Rifles, grenades, and homemade explosives were distributed carefully. Maria handed Sarah a small med kit. "Just in case," she said with a faint smile. Sarah thanked her but hoped she wouldn't need it. As everyone prepared, Kevin gave a short speech. "This isn't just about winning a battle," he said. "It's about showing the Empire that we're not going to roll over and die. We're fighting for every person they've killed, every home they've destroyed. Let's make them regret ever setting foot on our planet." At dawn, the teams moved into position. The air was cool, and the streets were eerily quiet. Sarah and Alex crouched behind a pile of rubble, watching as Team 1 took out the guards stationed around the tower. The shots were muffled, almost silent, thanks to suppressors attached to their weapons. Once the coast was clear, Sarah and Alex sprinted toward the base of the tower. Their hearts pounded as they worked quickly to set the charges. "Hurry up," Alex whispered urgently, keeping watch while Sarah connected wires to the explosive device. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to focus. When the last wire was in place, she nodded to Alex. "Let's go." As they ran back toward the extraction point, alarms blared. The Empire's soldiers had discovered the sabotage and were closing in fast. Bullets whizzed past them, kicking up dust and debris. Sarah stumbled but kept moving, adrenaline driving her forward. Just as they reached the others, the explosives detonated. A deafening roar echoed through the area as the tower collapsed in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. For a brief moment, the group allowed themselves to celebrate. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Empire. But their victory was short-lived. Reinforcements arrived, surrounding them with overwhelming numbers. Kevin shouted orders directing his team to fall back. "We can't win this fight," he yelled. "Retreat!" The group scattered, splitting up to confuse their pursuers. Sarah and Alex ducked into an abandoned building, catching their breath, as the sound of gunfire faded into the distance. "That was too close," Sarah muttered, wiping sweat from her forehead. Alex didn't respond. He was clutching his side again, blood seeping through his shirt. "You're bleeding," Sarah said, her voice tight with worry. She opened the med kit and pressed a bandage against the wound. "Hold still." "I'll be fine," Alex grunted, though his face was pale. "We've got bigger problems." He was right. Even as they patched him up, the reality of their situation weighed heavily on them. The Empire's response to the attack would be brutal. Retaliations were inevitable, and innocent civilians would suffer. Still, Sarah reminded herself why they were doing this. Every act of defiance mattered. Every strike against the invaders brought humanity one step closer to survival. In the Arctic, Emily Dawson and her team worked tirelessly to complete the prototype weapon. They called it the Aurora Cannon, named after the shimmering lights it produced during testing. The device was massive, requiring an entire chamber to house its components. Power cables snaked across the floor, connecting it to generators that hummed constantly. Despite the challenges, progress was steady. Ryan Collins stood beside Emily, holding a clipboard filled with notes. "We've run the simulations," he said. "If we can get it operational, it should be able to disable their shields long enough for conventional weapons to penetrate." "That's a big if," Emily replied, frowning. She knew the risks involved. Activating the cannon would drain power from nearby regions, leaving them vulnerable to attack. It was a gamble, but one they had to take. "We need to test it on a smaller scale first," she added. "Make sure it works before we commit." Over the next few days, the team conducted trial runs, adjusting the settings until they achieved the desired effect. The cannon emitted a pulsating beam of energy that disrupted electromagnetic fields within a limited range. While not perfect, it proved the concept was viable. Emily felt a flicker of hope. If they could scale it up, they might stand a chance. Back in Washington, D.C., Jason Carter and Laura Bennett monitored the Empire's reaction to the destruction of the communications tower. To their relief, the invaders seemed confused rather than enraged. The fake surrender message continued to hold, convincing them that the attack was the work of rogue elements rather than a coordinated effort. "They're buying it," Laura said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "For now," Jason replied cautiously. He knew the deception wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, the Empire would realize the truth and retaliate with devastating force. Until then, they had to keep pushing forward. "How's the misinformation campaign holding up?" he asked. "It's working," Laura said. "Their forces are consolidating instead of advancing. That gives us more time to prepare." Jason nodded, feeling a mix of pride and anxiety. Pride because humanity was fighting back, even against impossible odds. Anxiety because the stakes were unimaginably high. One misstep could mean the end of everything. Across the world, acts of defiance continued. Underground networks shared intelligence, coordinating attacks on key targets. Factories once used for civilian purposes were repurposed to produce crude weapons. Civilians banded together, forming militias to protect their communities. Though the Empire's grip tightened, cracks began to show. Supplies dwindled, morale among their troops faltered, and dissent brewed within their ranks. In Los Angeles, Sarah and Alex regrouped with Kevin's team in a new safe house. The mood was somber, but determined. "We hit them hard today," Kevin said. "But tomorrow we hit them harder. This is our planet and we're taking it back." Sarah looked around the room, seeing the faces of people who refused to give up. She thought about the sacrifices already made, the lives lost, the homes destroyed, and felt a surge of resolve. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for its soul. And no matter how dark things became, they would never stop fighting, because surrender wasn't an option. Not for people like Sarah, Alex, Emily, Jason, and countless others. Not for humanity. The Aurora cannon stood ready in its chamber beneath the Arctic ice, a towering machine of human ingenuity and desperation. Emily Dawson walked around it, inspecting every detail. Her breath fogged in the cold air as she ran her fingers over the thick cables connecting the cannon to its power source. The team had worked tirelessly for weeks, and now the moment of truth was upon them. If the cannon failed, Earth's last hope would crumble. Ryan Collins stood nearby, holding a clipboard. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Everything checks out," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "The energy core is stable and the targeting system is aligned." Emily nodded but didn't respond. She couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just a weapon, it was humanity's lifeline. If it succeeded, they might stand a chance against the Galactic Empire. If it failed, billions more would die. "Let's do it," she finally said, her voice firm despite the knot in her stomach. The team gathered in the control room, their faces tense with anticipation. On a large monitor, a live feed showed an Imperial fleet hovering above Earth's atmosphere. These ships were heavily shielded, impenetrable by any conventional weapon, but the Aurora cannon was far from conventional. With trembling hands, Emily initiated the countdown. The hum of generators grew louder, vibrating through the walls. Lights flickered as the cannon drew massive amounts of power. When the countdown reached 0, the cannon fired. A beam of blinding light shot upward, piercing the sky. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the Imperial ships shuddered violently. Its shields flickered and collapsed, leaving it exposed. Cheers erupted in the control room, but Emily silenced them with a raised hand. "Don't celebrate yet," she warned. "We don't know how long the effect will last." The Empire's response was swift and brutal. Realizing the attack had come from the Arctic, they redirected their forces toward the region. Missiles rained down, obliterating nearby settlements and military installations. Civilians fled in panic, seeking refuge in underground bunkers. Despite the destruction, Emily and her team remained focused. They had proven that the cannon worked, and now it was up to others to capitalize on the breakthrough. In Washington, D.C., Jason Carter watched the aftermath unfold on a series of monitors. The success of the Aurora cannon had given humanity a glimmer of hope, but it came at a terrible cost. Entire towns in the Arctic had been wiped out and millions were displaced. Laura Bennett sat beside him, her face grim. "We've got their attention," she said. "Now what?" Jason leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He knew the Empire wouldn't stop until Earth was completely subdued, or until they were driven away. "We keep hitting them," he replied. "Every time they think they've won, we strike. Again, we make them doubt themselves." Laura nodded, understanding the strategy. By keeping the Empire off balance, humanity could exploit their weaknesses. She turned her attention to the misinformation campaign, spreading reports of internal conflict within the Empire's ranks. Using hacked transmissions, she planted seeds of doubt among their soldiers, suggesting that their leaders were losing faith in the invasion. It was a risky move, but if it worked, it could turn the tide. In Los Angeles, Sarah Miller and Alex Rivera prepared for another mission. Kevin Doyle's resistance group had received intel about a supply convoy carrying vital resources for the Empire. Intercepting it would deal a significant blow to their operations. "This is our chance," Kevin said during a briefing. "If we cut off their supplies, they'll start to weaken." Sarah examined the map laid out on the table. The convoy was scheduled to pass through a narrow mountain road, making it vulnerable to ambush. "What's the plan?" she asked. "We'll split into 2 teams, Kevin explained. Team 1 will set up roadblocks ahead of the convoy, forcing them to slow down. Team 2 will hit them from behind, trapping them in the middle. Once they're pinned, we plant the explosives and get out." Alex raised his hand. "I'm with Team 2, he said. Sarah frowned but didn't argue. She knew better than to try convincing him otherwise. Instead, she focused on preparing medical supplies, knowing injuries were inevitable. The night before the mission, Sarah found herself sitting alone in the corner of the safe house. She stared at the medkit in her lap, thinking about the people she had treated, and those she hadn't been able to save. Maria approached quietly and sat beside her. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "Sometimes, I wonder if we're making a difference. So many people are dying." Maria placed a hand on her shoulder. "We are making a difference," she said firmly. "Every convoy we destroy, every soldier we take out, it all adds up. We're giving humanity a fighting chance." Sarah nodded, drawing strength from Maria's words. She reminded herself why they were doing this. Giving up wasn't an option, not when so much was at stake. The next morning, the teams moved into position. The sun rose slowly over the mountains, casting long shadows across the road. Sarah stayed close to Alex, her heart pounding as they waited for the convoy to arrive. When the first vehicle appeared, Kevin gave the signal. Explosions rocked the road ahead, sending plumes of smoke into the air. The convoy screeched to a halt, its drivers scrambling to assess the situation. Team 2 sprang into action, firing on the rear vehicles. Chaos erupted as the Empire's soldiers returned fire. Bullets whizzed past Sarah and Alex as they sprinted toward the center of the convoy. Alex planted charges on a fuel tanker while Sarah kept watch, her rifle ready. "Hurry!" she urged, spotting reinforcements approaching in the distance. Alex finished just in time, and the pair retreated to a safe distance. The explosives detonated, engulfing the convoy in flames. Cheers broke out among the resistance fighters, but there was no time to celebrate. Enemy reinforcements closed in quickly, forcing the group to scatter. As they fled into the wilderness, Sarah checked on Alex, who was limping slightly. "You good?" she asked. "I'll manage," he replied, though his face was pale with pain. Sarah tightened the bandage around his side, grateful he was still alive. They had succeeded, but the cost was high. Several members of the group hadn't made it back. Across the globe, similar missions unfolded. In Europe, Rachel Hayes led a battalion that liberated Paris after days of brutal street fighting. In Asia, guerrilla fighters ambushed Imperial patrols, reclaiming villages one by one. Each victory, no matter how small, fueled the fires of rebellion. Humanity was battered and broken, but it refused to yield. In space, the Empire began to feel the strain. Their soldiers, once confident in their superiority, grew uneasy. Whispers of dissent spread through their ranks, amplified by Laura's misinformation campaign. Back on Earth, Jason coordinated efforts to broadcast images of the Empire's failures to their homeworld. The psychological impact was profound. Morale plummeted, and cracks began to form in their seemingly invincible facade. Despite the progress, the war was far from over. The Empire still held vast territories and possessed overwhelming firepower. But humanity had proven something crucial. They were not defeated. Not yet. And as long as even a single person remained willing to fight, the Empire's grip on Earth would never be secure. For Sarah, Alex, Emily, Jason, and countless others, the battle continued. They fought not just for survival, but for the future. For a world where humanity could rise from the ashes and rebuild. It was a daunting task, but one they embraced with unwavering resolve, because surrender wasn't an option, not for them, not for anyone. The Empire's response to humanity's growing resistance was swift and merciless. Entire cities were razed to the ground, their populations either killed or forced into hiding. The invaders seemed intent on crushing any sign of defiance, but humanity refused to back down. In Los Angeles, Sarah Miller and Alex Rivera regrouped with Kevin Doyle's team in a new safe house deep within the mountains. The air was thick with tension as they planned their next move. "We've hit them hard," Kevin said during a meeting, his voice low but steady. "But we need to do more than just slow them down. We need to cripple them." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. She knew the risks involved, but she also understood that every strike against the Empire brought them closer to victory. Alex, still recovering from his injuries, leaned forward. "What about their command centers?" he asked. "If we take out their leaders, it could cause chaos in their ranks." Kevin considered the idea. "It's risky," he admitted. "Their command centers are heavily guarded, but if we can pull it off, it might be worth it." The group spent hours poring over maps and schematics, searching for weaknesses in the Empire's defenses. They identified a key facility located in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. It served as both a communications hub and a staging area for troop deployments. Taking it out would deal a significant blow to the Empire's operations in the region. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Jason Carter and Laura Bennett worked tirelessly to exploit the cracks forming within the Empire's ranks. Using intercepted transmissions, Laura discovered evidence of growing dissent among their soldiers. Some questioned the invasion's purpose, while others expressed frustration at the unexpected resistance they faced. They're not as united as they seem, Laura told Jason, her eyes lighting up with excitement. We can use this to our advantage, Jason agreed. He proposed broadcasting propaganda directly to the Empire's troops, highlighting their failures and sowing doubt about their mission. Let's make them question why they're here, he said. If we can turn them against each other, it'll weaken their resolve. Laura set to work immediately, creating fake news reports and testimonies from supposed Imperial officers criticizing the invasion. She hacked into their communication networks and disseminated the content across their fleet. The effect was subtle but noticeable. Reports began filtering in of decreased morale and even isolated incidents of mutiny among the Empire's forces. The Arctic Emily Dawson and her team prepared for another test of the Aurora cannon. The first successful deployment had proven its potential, but scaling it up required immense power. Entire regions surrounding the facility had been left defenseless, leaving civilians vulnerable to attack. Despite the ethical dilemmas, Emily knew there was no other choice. Humanity's survival depended on perfecting the weapon. Ryan Collins stood beside her, holding a clipboard filled with notes. The energy core is stable, he reported, but firing again will drain even more power. Are you sure about this? Emily hesitated for a moment before nodding. We have to try, she said firmly. Every second counts. As the cannon charged, the hum of generators grew louder, shaking the walls of the underground chamber. On the monitors, a live feed showed an Imperial ship patrolling Earth's atmosphere. When the countdown reached 0, the cannon fired once. More. A blinding beam shot skyward, striking the ship and disabling its shields. Moments later, missiles launched from nearby bunkers hit the exposed vessel, causing it to explode in a brilliant flash of light. The control room erupted in cheers, but Emily silenced them quickly. Don't celebrate yet, she warned. They'll retaliate, and when they do, we need to be ready. Her prediction came true almost immediately. Imperial forces redirected their attention to the Arctic, launching a full-scale assault on the facility. Explosions rocked the ground above, sending shockwaves through the underground complex. Emily and her team scrambled to evacuate, carrying critical data and equipment with them. As they fled into the freezing wilderness, Emily glanced back at the burning remains of the lab. It broke her heart to leave behind months of hard work, but she reminded herself that the knowledge they had gained would live on. Across the globe, acts of rebellion continued to spread. In Europe, Rachel Hayes led a daring raid on an Imperial stronghold outside Berlin. Her battalion, composed of civilians turned fighters, used guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver the invaders. By cutting off supply lines and targeting weak points, they managed to reclaim the city after days of brutal fighting. Civilians emerged from hiding, cheering as their flag was raised once more. In Asia, resistance groups coordinated attacks on multiple fronts, stretching the Empire's forces thin. Villages that had been under occupation for weeks rose up in unison, driving out Imperial patrols and reclaiming their land. Though many paid the ultimate price, their sacrifices inspired others to join the fight. Even in space, humanity found ways to resist. Engineers repurposed old satellites into makeshift weapons, launching surprise assaults on Imperial ships. While these efforts were small compared to the Empire's vast fleet, they created enough disruption to buy valuable time. Back in Los Angeles, Kevin's team finalized their plan to strike the command center. The operation would require precision and coordination. Team 1 will create a diversion at the front entrance, Kevin explained. Team 2 will infiltrate through the underground tunnels and plant explosives at the core of the facility. Team 3 will provide cover fire and ensure everyone gets out alive. Sarah volunteered for Team 2, knowing her medical skills might be needed during the infiltration. Alex insisted on joining her despite his lingering injuries. I'm not sitting this one out, he said firmly. Reluctantly, Kevin agreed, assigning them both to the mission. The night of the attack, the teams moved into position. Darkness blanketed the city as they approached the command center. The streets were eerily quiet, abandoned by civilians who had fled or gone into hiding. At Kevin's signal, Team 1 detonated explosives near the main entrance, drawing the attention of Imperial soldiers. Chaos erupted as gunfire filled the air. Taking advantage of the distraction, Sarah and Alex slipped into the underground tunnels. Their headlamps cast faint beams of light as they navigated the narrow passageways. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the smell of damp earth filled the air. Every step felt like a gamble, but they pressed on, determined to complete their mission. When they reached the core of the facility, Alex planted the charges while Sarah kept watch. Her heart pounded as she scanned the shadows, expecting enemy soldiers to appear at any moment. "Hurry," she whispered urgently. "I'm almost done," Alex replied, his hands trembling as he connected the final wire. Once the charges were set, they retraced their steps, moving as quickly as possible. Just as they reached the exit, the explosives detonated, collapsing the tunnels and destroying the command center. The explosion shook the entire building, sending debris raining down on the streets below. Imperial soldiers scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The facility was in ruins and Kevin's team had already vanished into the night. As dawn broke over the horizon, Sarah and Alex regrouped with the others in a hidden bunker. Exhaustion weighed heavily on everyone, but there was a sense of accomplishment in the air. They had struck a major blow against the Empire, proving that humanity was far from defeated. Yet, the war was far from over. The Empire still held vast territories and possessed overwhelming firepower. But humanity had shown incredible resilience, refusing to bow to despair. For Sarah, Alex, Emily, Jason, and countless others, the battle continued. They fought not just for survival, but for a future where humanity could rise from the ashes and rebuild. It was a daunting task, but one they embraced with unwavering determination, because surrender wasn't an option, not for them, not for anyone. The final days of the war were marked by both triumph and tragedy. Across Earth, humanity's resistance reached its peak. The Galactic Empire, once seen as an unstoppable force, now faced a united planet determined to reclaim its freedom. In May, Los Angeles, Sarah Miller and Alex Rivera stood on a hill overlooking the city. Smoke rose from the ruins of the command center they had destroyed, and the streets below buzzed with activity as survivors began to rebuild. For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope. Kevin Doyle approached them, his face lined with exhaustion but also pride. "We did it," he said softly. "We hit them where it hurts." Sarah nodded, though her thoughts were heavy. She thought about all the lives lost, the friends, family, and strangers who had sacrificed everything for this cause. "It's not over yet," she reminded him. "They'll come back stronger." Kevin didn't argue. He knew she was right. The Empire still controlled large parts of the world, and their retaliation would be fierce. But for now, the resistance had won a crucial victory. Civilians emerged from hiding, banding together to clean up the wreckage and care for the wounded. Sarah joined them, using her medical skills to treat those in need. Alex stayed close, helping wherever he could despite his lingering injuries. Together, they worked tirelessly, knowing that every moment counted. In Washington, D.C., Jason Carter and Laura Bennett monitored the Empire's response to the growing rebellion. Reports poured in from around the globe. Cities liberated, Imperial forces driven back, and morale among their troops plummeting. Yet Jason remained cautious. "They're not going to give up easily," he warned during a meeting with military leaders. "This is their last stand. Expect everything they've got." Laura focused on maintaining the misinformation campaign, spreading images of the Empire's failures across their communication networks. Her efforts paid off as reports of dissent within their ranks increased. Some soldiers refused orders while others openly questioned the invasion's purpose. "It's working," she told Jason late one night, her voice tinged with relief. "Their unity is cracking." Jason allowed himself a small smile. "Good work," he said, "but we can't let up now. Not when we're so close." In the Arctic, Emily Dawson and her team regrouped after narrowly escaping the destruction of their facility. Though the Aurora cannon had been lost, the knowledge they gained from it lived on. Engineers across the globe worked to replicate its design, building smaller versions that could be deployed in key locations. Emily traveled from site to site, offering guidance and encouragement. Despite the loss of her lab, she refused to give up. "We've come too far to stop now," she told Ryan Collins during one of their long nights. "Every weapon we build brings us closer to winning." Ryan nodded, though his eyes betrayed his fatigue. "I just hope it's enough," he admitted. Emily placed a hand on his shoulder. "It has to be," she said firmly. "Because if it isn't, we'll find another way." The Empire's counterattack came swiftly and brutally. Massive fleets descended upon Earth, targeting resistant strongholds with overwhelming force. Cities burned and countless lives were lost. But humanity fought back with everything they had. Guerrilla fighters ambushed patrols, missile silos. Armed with experimental weapons, targeted Imperial ships and underground networks coordinated attacks on multiple fronts. The resistance adapted quickly, using hit-and-run tactics to wear down the invaders. In Europe, Rachel Hayes led her battalion in a desperate defense of Paris. Imperial forces launched a full-scale assault, bombarding the city with artillery and airstrikes. Civilians fled into underground shelters as Rachel and her team held the line. "We can't let them take the city again," she shouted, rallying her soldiers. Against all odds, they managed to repel the attack, forcing the Empire to retreat. When the dust settled, Rachel stood amidst the rubble, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered to herself. "We held them off. As weeks turned into months, the tide of the war began to shift. The Empire's resources dwindled, stretched thin by humanity's relentless resistance. Their soldiers, once confident in their superiority, grew weary and demoralized. Whispers of rebellion spread through their ranks, fueled by Laura's propaganda campaign. Even their leaders seemed uncertain, questioning whether the invasion was worth the cost. Finally, the breaking point came. A coordinated global assault targeted the Empire's remaining strongholds, driving them out of Earth's atmosphere. Resistance fighters launched salvaged missiles at their ships, while engineers activated makeshift versions of the Aurora cannon to disable their shields. One by one, the Imperial vessels retreated, leaving behind a battered but defiant planet. When the last ship disappeared into the stars, cheers erupted around the world. Survivors emerged from hiding, embracing one another in joy and relief. Flags were raised, and makeshift memorials were built to honor those who had fallen. Humanity had won, but the victory felt bittersweet. Billions had died, and entire cities lay in ruins. The scars of the invasion would linger for generations. In the eBay aftermath, Sarah and Alex returned to New York City, hoping to find some semblance of normalcy. The skyline was unrecognizable, its once iconic buildings reduced to rubble. Yet amid the destruction, people worked together to rebuild. Sarah volunteered at a field hospital, treating the injured and comforting the grieving. Alex helped clear debris and construct temporary shelters. They didn't speak much about the future. Instead, they focused on the present, taking each day as it came. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Sarah and Alex stood on a rooftop, looking out over the city. "Do you think we'll ever really recover?" Alex asked quietly. Sarah hesitated before answering. "I don't know," she admitted. "But we have to try. For everyone who didn't make it, we owe them that much." Alex nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah," he said, "we owe them that." In Washington, D.C., Jason and Laura reflected on the war's end. The Department of Defense had been transformed into a hub for rebuilding efforts, coordinating resources and aid for affected regions. Jason sat at his desk, staring at a map of Earth marked with areas still under repair. "We've got a long road ahead of us," he said to Laura, who stood beside him. "I know," she replied. "But we've proven something important, that, no matter how bad things get, we can overcome it. Together." Jason smiled faintly. "Yeah, together." Across the globe, humanity began the painstaking process of healing. Memorials were erected to honor the fallen, and stories of heroism were shared to inspire future generations. Scientists like Emily Dawson continued their work, ensuring that Earth would never again be caught unprepared. Engineers rebuilt cities, farmers replanted fields, and teachers reopened schools. Slowly but surely, life began to return to a fragile sense of normalcy. Yet even as they rebuilt, humanity looked to the stars with newfound resolve. The invasion had shown them how vulnerable they were, but also how resilient. They vowed to protect their planet, to explore the cosmos, and to ensure that no empire, no matter how powerful, would ever threaten their home again. For Sarah, Alex, Emily, Jason, Laura, and countless others, the battle had changed them forever. They had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged stronger for it. Though the scars of the war would never fully fade, they carried with them the knowledge that humanity's spirit could not be broken. Surrender was never an option, not for them, and not for anyone.